Hey there. I'm Rachel Reenstra. For those of you who don't know, for those of you who do, that's pretty obvious. And I wanted to introduce somebody that I think is important for all of us to take note. And he's been a staple in my transformational process along this journey. So instead of trying to explain everything that he is, let me just put it out there. This is the best of Sacha Stone in about 15 minutes, and then a teaser to our interview, which is going to be in 2 parts.
The universal law of one is written into the alchemy of reality, that we have the choice to transmute and transcend any given situation. So whatever the horror is on the radar screen of life, we actually have a duty of care and a mandate and a soul covenant to ask ourselves the question, does this offend my soul? Yeah. And if it does, I have the toolkit. I am the one born with the innate navigation to be able to take that false reality, absolve it, salute it for being a good teacher, absolve it, release it, and then transmute and transcend myself into a higher expression. And along the way, I will affect those around me in my field of influence.
Re-identify who we are, what we are, and how we want to live life in this world. That's it. So we must stop seeing this as me versus the state, me versus the crown, me versus the police, me versus the court system. They're all rogue, guys. All those covenants and contracts have been breached. They are all in high treason, which is why I know I'm able to speak the way I'm speaking and say what I say, because I happen to know I've not only got a lawfulness on my side, actually I've also got legality on my side. It's called right to life, and no government, no authority, municipal, federal, or otherwise, was ever given the mandate or the authority to stand over us and force us to suffocate ourselves. And that's what it's come down to.
So human trafficking is the big concern that we have right now. And we believe that only by releasing this story into the light of human trafficking and child sex abuse, do we begin to get people of the world to realize that we are caught up in biblical prophecy of epic proportion. Absolutely. And it requires our attention. We can no longer pretend that it is not happening.
No. How it is that we have permissioned this, and more importantly, how it is that we can withdraw our permission now from this paradigm.
You speak about a new earth. So it means that there is in your mind an old earth, an old world. You speak about fears, about money, about time. How do you see the world today?
I see it still being configured according to time and to money, and very much to fear. The reason why we surround ourselves with intercessionaries and the intercessionary principles which stand between us as humans and our true capacity to engage with our humanity. This is something we need to address, and we need to give full, undiluted focus to this. How we plan our lives and downgrade our existence into units of time, and how that time is really an accreted value of fear, being afraid of what might exist around the corner, being afraid of the past and the future, and not being in the present because our attention is so connected to having regrets about the past and having fears and concerns about the future, taking out insurance policies, taking out pension plans, constantly rushing from A to B and never being grounded in the present.
Who is responsible for that, do you think?
Well, we are absolutely responsible for it because we are permissioning these mutant systems and ideas to control our lives. Again, I'm trying to simplify it by talking about time and money and fear. And to fully address the fear aspect, let me just say that we need to address the business of sovereignty and how we need to step outside of these invisible contracts that we have engaged with, The only reason why you have to pay a penalty or a speeding fine, or even give your name to a policeman or some bureaucrat and fill out the forms, is because you have been tricked from birth into a registration process where you have been handed over to a state, a corporate nation state, actually, a privately owned corporate nation state that is a business. And for the last 250 to 300 years at least, the emergence of the modern nation states, of which there are between 190 and 200, depending on which side of the Palestine and Israel debate you stand on. We are in this catastrophic labyrinth now, which is fundamentally owned and contained by the corporate nation states and the what I call the Babylonian priesthood that drives these corporate nation states. So the fact that we are indentured into private trusts, you are not regarded as a living woman. When a policeman stops you, he asks you for your identity, doesn't he? And when you say, my name is X, he says, no, I want to see your papers. He doesn't believe what you say. What you say is not important. The paper defines who you are. Your identity is a trust, a birth bond that is being traded on the stock market, that can be penalized and fined and have money pulled out of that bond. So you are being commercialized, monetized. You are a unit of currency on the streets of your own country. You are not a living woman or a living man. This is serious stuff. This is what we're learning. This is what I'm learning. I've spent 14 odd years now walking in a straight line on these issues, slowly assembling what I believe to be the generic alphabet of the human heart.
So it means that you were observing and interviewing people that you met?
Yes, I was. I was asking a uniform question, generally, especially of the religious and spiritual leaders, and this was asking them if the religion of the human heart took precedence over their own sectarian religion. I wanted to know the answer to this. I wanted to know from the Taoist and Buddhist perspective and the Islamist perspective and the Christian perspective, if this was something that could be acknowledged even by leadership in the religious orders and denominations. And the interesting thing was, the answer was yes. This was something I stole, of course, from Tagore, the wonderful Indian mystic who coined the religion of the human heart. But that was my obsession. And
when was that? 20 years ago?
97. I'm not quite that old. 97, I began my journey in 97. Yeah.
And then what was the next step after that?
A next, a higher frequency and degree of insanity was my next step. I became slightly more insane and pursued peace as an idea. I was ignorant enough to believe in peace as an idea, as a word. And I was educated by political figures, a few of them who patronized me and took me aside on my campaign and said, listen, son, this is how the world works. You know, it doesn't work that way. Nobody is going to make a peace. Not yet. There's too much money to be made. And so in many conversations, especially, as I said, with political leaders, I learned that that would be very much a failed objective. And I pursued art and cultural initiatives and some peace initiatives, education initiatives through Humanitarian for many years. And then finally this arrived at, for me, a realization that the only way to have any impact in this world was to exit this world. The ultimate goal doesn't exist.
Okay.
And if it did exist, I would have failed in what I am seeking to achieve in my lifetime. For me, I am not seeking anything for anyone else. The momentum or the wave that we begin in what we do will gather in direct proportion to the amount of people whose hearts and minds will identify with that frequency that we are putting out. So the most important thing that we can individually concern ourselves with is our own inner journey, and not to give a damn about the external world or the explicit world. It is so much more important that we focus on our own footsteps.
So what is the vision? Is the vision a better word?
It is more than a better world. It is a better state of being. It is a higher state of consciousness whilst we are in our third density field of expression, whilst we are inhabiting bodies and we are living in a physical plane. This is not our ultimate birthright. We are here to play and to create, inform, and to enjoy this process, to find bliss and serendipity in this process. We are not here to be butchered and bastardized by little gray men, technocrats and bureaucrats, and people who govern their own lives by fear and time and money. This is a trap that many of us have fallen into, but we can just as easily withdraw from this trap. We cannot address within ourselves our sovereignty, and we cannot address our consciousness effectively unless we are considering the whole system and having a holistic approach, not only to our own lives, but to the life of the planet as a whole.
Okay, so what would be the first step for these people?
Stop paying taxes. This will make me a very unpopular man by many people for saying something like that. And believe me, I've heard all of the intellectual arguments about how we need to keep our roads paved and how we need to keep the streets clean. But this is nonsense. If anyone knows what happens with taxes, no income tax goes towards streets or schools. None of it. Study your own economy. Study your national economy. I've studied these things for years. This is part of the boring work we've had to do in analysis to be able to diagnose what the problem is with our civilization. Taxes do not pay for streets. They pay for war. That's what they pay for. It is commercial or business taxes that pay for the streets, invariably, and the schools and the hospitals. But in a conscious society, in a conscious civilization, we do not need schools. We need to take children into life where they discover life. They can stand on the market squares like they did with Socrates and learn far more by discovering life than by sitting in these ridiculous square rooms surrounded by copper wire and fluorescent light bulbs, poisoning minds and hearts, and then doing what? Programming them like some mutant software downloaded into these children about A, B, C, and 1, 2, 3, all of which is nonsense. Newtonian physics is dead. There is new physics has emerged, and we're not even teaching this to our children. The mask is almost off. And once that mask falls, and the emperor is found to have no clothes, standing behind the curtain, the world is going to change very, very quickly. It is a quantum phenomenon that is unfolding with this movement. It is not fixed. It will never be static, which is why we do not define it by laws or by statutes or by regulations or by codes. We have only a few guiding principles, and those principles are offered or gifted to the communities that are beginning all around the world. But there is no law. Human beings, when they are left to default into their pure nature, are not warmongers. They are not aggressive, angry, jealous, bloodlusting beings. This is a nonsense taught to us in schools, that we are fundamentally aggressive and we love going to war. No, we do not. We never enjoyed going to war. Human beings do not enjoy fighting. But when they are manipulated into fighting, territorial disputes by princes and kings and priests and bishops, popes, yes, we do the fighting when we are told that we have no choice. So this is a part of the story that needs to change. It's not so much to teach, but to allow the blank canvas upon which people can begin to paint their own pure law, their own highest expression, their own creativity. And once human beings are able to engage in a world which is not being governed by 1260 time, and which is not being governed and manipulated by money and by money manipulation, then you will begin to see people breathing. You'll see people feeling well, engaging with consciousness, engaging with spirituality, engaging with creativity. This is the world we want. We don't enjoy sending our babies to war. That's bullshit.
So we are coming together. This tribunal is acting as a catalyst for that coming together, for realizing that consensus and sharpening that focus, not because we're at war with anything, at anyone. You cannot be at war with war. You cannot be at war with disease. You cannot be at war with poverty. You have to comprehend these things, understand these things, and then transmute them.
So be clear, the three things that the corporations masquerading as governments give to humans, that's you and me, is spells, bonds, and poisons. Nothing else.
We will see that this Corona crowning event was the crowning glory of the emancipation of humanity. It is time for humanity to reclaim ourselves from this draconian tyranny. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
I've been through a lot. I've been through a hell of a lot. And then Mayfair, and you will sign a contract. And I was given one night to go home and reflect. I withdrew, but I knew what that meant, that if I didn't go with that was the end of it. There was no possible way I would get the distribution or the radio. I'm not a fucking Rockefeller, for God's sake. I just can't believe the stories going around. What I'm learning, the essential piece, that's your actualized human right there. Wow. This civilization is in a tailspin. This planet is in an absolute psycho-civilizational meltdown. Wow. The planetary public health administration and the multilateral governance sectors have now gone into conspiracy against the living souls and are trying to now genocide their own species. Yeah. Wow.
It's almost midnight. Time to do the right thing. It's almost midnight. Chance would be a fine thing if I could do the right thing.
And I'm like, is it so malleable that we are now able to see the changes in biblical references? And is it because of Cern?
So please understand that Cern is the...
If I could do the right thing.
Why are certain people waking up?
What is it that is bringing about this extraordinary bifurcation of dystopia, which is breaking families and communities and society and culture itself?
Yep.
The answer to that is it